only to realize it was my public trial. 75 relatives, not one smile. My father, Edward Parker, handed me a red folder with DNA results inside and said, "You're not ours. You owe us. Pay us back." My mother, Linda, ripped my car keys straight out of my hand like I was a criminal trying to flee. My sister, Chloe, stood 2 feet away, live streaming the whole thing to her followers. I was surrounded by 75 people I had once called family, and not a single one of them defended me. Then a man stepped forward from the back of the ballroom, a man my parents had sworn was dead long before I was born, my biological father, and he didn't come empty-handed. Before a single one, and it truly means more to me than you know. Now let me take you back to where this story began. 4 weeks, I was charting vitals in the ICU break room at Johns Hopkins Hospital when my phone rang. "Hansel, oh my God, you will not believe this." Chloe's voice came through the speaker, sharp and breathless. My younger sister rarely called unless she needed something, money, a ride, or someone to listen to the latest drama from her influencer world. "What's going on?" I asked quietly. It was night shift. Quiet mattered. "Mom and Dad are throwing you a surprise party for your 30th, like a real one. Everyone's invited, Aunt Margaret, Uncle Thomas, the cousins from Ohio, literally the whole family." I nearly dropped my coffee. A party. For me. In 30 years, my parents had never thrown me a birthday celebration. Not for 18, not for 21, not even when I graduated nursing school at the top of my class. But Chloe? Her 21st birthday had been a $15,000 spectacle at a private club outside Baltimore. 100 guests, a 5-tier cake. Dad gave a speech about how proud he was of his little star. My 21st? Meatloaf at home. After dinner, Mom patted my shoulder and said, "Money's tight this year, sweetheart. You understand." I always understood. "Are you sure?" I asked carefully. "They don't really do parties for me." "I know, that's what makes it special," Chloe laughed. "Turning 30 is a big deal. They want to do something nice, but you have to act surprised. I wasn't supposed to tell you." "I'll act surprised," I said. After we hung up, I just sat there in the break room, staring at my lukewarm coffee. Maybe things were changing. Maybe after 30 years they finally saw me. I thought that party might prove I mattered. I had no idea it was going to prove the opposite. The week before the party, I did what I always do. I ran the numbers. 7 years as an ICU nurse. 7 years of 12-hour shifts, code blues, and holding strangers' hands while they took their last breath. And every single month for those 7 years, I sent $500 home to help my parents. $42,000 in total. I never asked for it back. I never even mentioned it. That's what family does, right? You help when you can. Meanwhile, Chloe, with her 75,000 followers and zero steady income, still lived in my parents' basement. She hadn't contributed a dime. Last month, she asked Dad for $12,000 to expand her personal brand. He wrote the check without hesitation. 3 years ago, when my car broke down, I asked if I could borrow $2,000 for a down payment on a used Honda. Dad looked at me like I'd asked for an organ donation. "You're a strong, independent woman, Hansel. You'll figure it out." So I did. I took out a loan, picked up extra shifts, paid it off myself. Mom's voice echoed in my head. "Chloe's still finding herself. She needs support. You don't need anything from us. You're the capable one." The capable one. Translation? The one they could ignore. That night, while getting ready for what I thought was my birthday celebration, a thought surfaced that I'd buried for years. I had never actually seen my original birth certificate. Mom said it was destroyed in a flood back in 2005, but out of curiosity, I'd once checked the county records. There was no major flood in Baltimore in 2005. I told myself I was overthinking it. Why would my parents lie about something like that? 3 days before the party, I received an email I'd been waiting 5 years to see. 3 days before the party, the email finally came. I had been officially selected as a candidate for the charge nurse position at Johns Hopkins Hospital. The interview was scheduled in 2 weeks. Everything I had worked toward for 7 years, every overnight shift, every code blue, every holiday spent in scrubs, was finally within reach. There was only one condition. The hospital required a professional recommendation letter. Someone with board connections. Someone who could vouch not just for my performance, but for my character. My supervisor looked at me across her desk and said, "Didn't your father serve on the board here? Edward Parker?" A letter from him would carry weight, so I called him. "A recommendation letter?" Dad sounded almost pleased. "Of course, Hansel, I'd be happy to write one." Relief hit me so fast it nearly made me dizzy. "I'll give it to you at your birthday party," he added. "We'll make it special." A father presenting his daughter's future in front of the whole family. Something in his tone felt too polished, too carefully delivered. But I brushed it aside. Maybe he was just sentimental. 30 was a milestone. "That would mean a lot," I said softly. "Anything for my girl." My girl. He had never called me that before. That was always Chloe's title. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The promotion, the party, the letter. Everything seemed to be aligning. I was even ahead on my savings. 3 more months and I'd have enough for a down payment on a condo in Canton. For the first time in years, I let myself believe something dangerous. Maybe they finally saw me, really saw me. I bought a navy dress for the party, elegant, understated, professional. I wanted to look competent, accomplished, worthy. I had no idea I was dressing for my own execution. The night of the party, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. The dress fit perfectly. My makeup was subtle but refined. I even brought my parents a gift. A leather-bound photo album I had spent weeks putting together. Family vacations, Christmas mornings, hospital graduation day. All of it. Ridiculous, right? Bringing a gift to your own birthday celebration. But that was me. Always giving. Always trying to earn something that should have been freely given. I remembered being 10 years old, painting my mom a Mother's Day picture. Watercolors. A garden in bloom. I thought it was beautiful. She barely glanced at it before turning to Chloe's crooked stick figure drawing. "Oh, sweetheart, you're such an artist. Let's put this on the fridge." My painting went into a drawer. I found it years later, still rolled up, never framed. From that moment on, I tried harder, studied harder, worked harder. If I could just be exceptional enough, maybe they would look at me the way they looked at her. 30 years. 30 years of trying. Before leaving my apartment, I checked my reflection one last time. Tonight is different, I told myself. They're proud of you. Dad is giving you a letter. Things are changing. I grabbed my keys. That's when I saw Chloe sitting in her car outside my building, her phone pointed directly at my Honda. "Hey," I called out. "What are you doing?" She grinned and slipped her phone into her lap. "Nothing. I just love your car. Can I borrow it sometime?" "Sure," I answered automatically. "Great," she said, smiling a little too wide. "See you at the party." A cold sensation crawled down my spine. I ignored it. I had spent my entire life ignoring warning signs. The Four Seasons Hotel Baltimore glowed like a promise. Chandeliers shimmered through the ballroom windows. Shadows of guests moved inside. My parents had reserved the entire private ballroom, something they had only ever done for Chloe's high school graduation. I sat in my car for a moment, practicing my surprised expression, wide eyes, hand over heart. Oh my goodness, you shouldn't have. It felt silly, but I wanted to give them the moment they expected. I wanted this night to be perfect. I walked through the lobby, heels clicking against marble floors. A hostess smiled politely. "The Parker party? Right through those doors." I took a breath and pushed them open. Silence. No streamers, no balloons, no laughter, no surprise, just 75 faces turning toward me in unison. No one was smiling. My rehearsed expression froze. Uncle Thomas stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Aunt Margaret clutched her purse against her chest like a shield, avoiding my eyes. Cousins I hadn't seen in years stared at me with something that looked like pity. and judgment. There was no cake, no decorations, just a long table in the center of the room, and on that table, a single red folder. My parents stood behind it like prosecutors behind a bench. Edward held a microphone. Hansel, his voice echoed across the ballroom, cold, formal. Sit down. We need to talk. My legs moved before my brain did. A single chair had been placed facing them, facing the entire room, like a defendant in court. That's when I noticed the woman in the corner, not a party photographer, a videographer. They were recording this. Dad? My voice came out smaller than I intended. What's going on? He didn't answer. He opened the red folder instead. Hansel, do you know why we invited 75 people here tonight? It's my birthday, I said, and even to my own ears it sounded weak. No, he shook his head slowly. They are here as witnesses. The room shifted, chairs scraped. Someone cleared their throat. Witnesses to what? Edward removed a document from the folder. His hands were steady, like he had practiced this moment. This is a DNA test. He held it up so everyone could see. Your mother and I submitted samples 3 months ago. The results are conclusive. My heart stopped. You are not our biological daughter. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. I knew it. She never looked like them. Something was always off. I gripped the arms of the chair. That's impossible. You're not ours, Hansel, my father repeated. Linda stepped forward, her face twisted with something I had never seen so clearly before, resentment. You never were, she said. We took you in. We raised you. We gave you everything. Her eyes hardened. And this is how you repay us? Edward's voice rose, sharp and theatrical. By slandering us to your friends, he said. By telling people we were never good enough. By acting like you were mistreated. We have witnesses, he cut in, sweeping his hand toward the room. People who've heard you complain about how unfair your life was. About how Chloe got everything and you got nothing. My thoughts spun. Yes, I had vented to friends. Of course I had. Who doesn't? But I had never lied. I had never twisted the truth. Edward calmly removed another sheet from the folder. Columns, dates, numbers. This, he announced, is an itemized breakdown of everything we spent raising you. Housing, food, tuition, clothing. He paused just long enough for the number to land. $600,000. The figure hovered in the air like a blade. And we expect repayment. Before I could process it, Linda lunged forward. Her fingers clamped around my wrist, and she yanked my car keys from my hand so quickly I barely registered it. This vehicle, she said, lifting the keys like evidence in court, was purchased using income from a job you only got because of your father's influence. I paid for that car myself, I said, my voice shaking. Every payment. I have the loan documents. Your salary comes from Johns Hopkins, she replied coolly, where Edward served on the board for years. Without him, you would be nothing. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You owe us everything. I looked around the ballroom. 75 people who had sat at Christmas tables with me, who had hugged me, who had once told me they loved me. No one moved. Uncle Thomas even nodded slightly. She's got a point, Hansel. Your father opened a lot of doors for you. That's not how this works, I whispered. Smile for the camera, sis. Chloe stepped beside me, her phone inches from my face. The red recording light was on. This is insane content, she whispered gleefully. My followers are going to freak out. Family drama, secret DNA reveal. This is gold. Chloe, stop. Shh. I glanced at her screen. Thousands of viewers. Comments has to be fake. Those parents are insane. That poor girl. But it wasn't fake. This was my life, being dissected, broadcast, torn apart. And I was trapped in a chair while my own sister monetized my humiliation. That's when something inside me shifted. In the middle of the chaos, I noticed him, a man standing alone near the emergency exit. He wasn't dressed like anyone else in that room. No department store blazer, no outdated suit. His charcoal gray jacket was tailored, immaculate, the kind of fabric that held its shape. He looked to be in his early 60s. Silver threaded through dark hair, strong jaw, composed. But it was his eyes that held me. They weren't judgmental, they weren't curious. They looked pained. I didn't recognize him. He wasn't family. He wasn't a family friend, at least not one I'd ever met. So why was he here, standing in the shadows like he was waiting for something? Beside him stood a younger woman in a pencil skirt, clutching a thick manila folder. She kept glancing at her watch, whispering something urgently. He shook his head each time, patient, watching. "Hansol," Edward's voice snapped me back. "Are you listening?" "Who is that man?" I asked instead, pointing toward the corner. For a fraction of a second, my father's face changed. Fear, recognition. "No one," he said quickly. "Focus on what matters. You're going to sign this document." "Edward?" The stranger's voice cut cleanly through the room. Deep, controlled, commanding. The entire ballroom went silent. My father turned pale. "Not yet," the man continued almost gently. "Let her finish asking her questions." Linda grabbed Edward's arm. "Who let him in?" But neither of them answered. The man in the gray suit simply looked at me, and for a moment something flickered across his face that I couldn't quite name. Hope. "Hansol," Edward said again, his tone shifting, authority mixed with desperation. "You will sign this tonight, in front of everyone." He slid a contract across the table. At the top, in bold letters, promissory note. "This legally binds you to repay $600,000 over 10 years, he said, monthly installments. "I need time to read it," I replied. "You'll sign now." His eyes flicked briefly toward the man in gray, then back to me. "If you refuse, we will sue. 75 witnesses saw you receive food, shelter, education. You admitted it yourself. You owe us." "Edward," the voice came again, this time from the left side of the room. "Margaret Holloway, my aunt. Edward's older sister." She had risen slowly from her chair. Her face was drained of color. Her hands trembled. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. She was speaking to Linda, but her eyes kept drifting toward the man near the exit. "If he finds out what you—" "Margaret, sit down," Linda snapped. "But the receipts—" "Enough!" Linda's voice cracked like a whip. The room froze. "Receipts?" I repeated. No one answered. "Aunt Margaret," I said, turning fully toward her. "What receipts?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, looked at Linda, then at the floor. "Nothing," she whispered. I shouldn't have said anything. But I saw her hand tighten around her purse, saw how fiercely she held it, like she was guarding something inside. "Linda," Margaret's voice broke. "I still have them. The ones you told me to destroy 20 years ago. I couldn't do it. I kept copies." Linda's face drained completely of color. Whatever was inside Margaret's purse, whatever those receipts proved, my parents clearly never intended for me to see them. And in that moment, something clicked. I wasn't the one hiding secrets. They were. Edward moved quickly, as if he could outrun the crack that had just formed. He grabbed the microphone again, his voice booming through the ballroom with rehearsed authority. "Family friends," he declared, scanning the room. "I want you all to witness this moment." He paused just long enough to command attention. "Tonight, Hansel Parker, the woman we raised as our own, will acknowledge the debt she owes this family." Uncle Thomas began clapping. A few others joined in, hesitant but obedient. 30 years ago, Edward continued, Linda and I opened our home to a child no one wanted. We sacrificed. We struggled. We gave her everything. He turned toward me. And this is how she repays us. With ingratitude. With complaints. I could see it happening. The narrative shifting. Like ink spreading through water. "I always said she was ungrateful," someone muttered behind me. "Never appreciated anything," another voice chimed in. Edward faced me again, microphone still in hand. "Sign the document. Apologize to your family. Maybe we can salvage something from this. Chloe shoved her phone closer to my face. Say something, Hansel. My viewers want to hear you beg. I looked down at the contract. $600,000, 10 years of payments, my entire future handed over to people publicly dismantling me. And if I don't sign? I asked. My voice was steadier than I expected. Edward's expression hardened. Then I call Johns Hopkins tomorrow, he said calmly. I inform them their charge nurse candidate is a fraud, a liar, a woman who refuses to honor her debts. He smiled thinly. I served on their board for 15 years. Who do you think they'll believe? The threat settled over the room. My career, my condo, everything I had built, gone with one phone call. For a second, the air felt thin. But I'm an ICU nurse. I've stood beside hospital beds at 3 in the morning, holding a stranger's hand while machines screamed and families broke down in hallways. I don't panic when things collapse. I can't afford to. So I inhaled, then exhaled. And I stopped being the frightened little girl they expected. Dad, I said clearly, cutting through the murmurs. I have a question. He frowned. This wasn't part of the script. What? You said I'm not your biological daughter. You have DNA proof. I leaned forward slightly. So who are my biological parents? Silence. Linda jumped in quickly. They abandoned you. They didn't want you. We saved you. That's not what I asked. I stood slowly. I asked who they are. Dead, Edward snapped. Both of them. Car accident. Years ago. His answer came too fast. Interesting. I surprised myself with how calm I felt. So if they're dead, who provided the DNA sample to compare against mine? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. DNA tests require comparison samples, I continued. You can't just test my blood and declare I'm not yours. There has to be something to match it to. The crowd shifted. I saw brows furrow, confusion settling in. That's not your concern, Edward stammered. A dead person's DNA, I pressed. How did you get it? Did you exhume a body? Were you storing samples for 30 years? More whispers. Uncle Thomas slowly uncrossed his arms. Or, I said quietly, is one of my biological parents not dead at all? In the corner, the man in the gray suit took a step forward, and for the first time that night, my father looked truly afraid. Oh my God, this just got so good, Chloe said breathlessly into her phone. She was still streaming, still narrating like this was some reality show. So basically, she told her followers, my parents found out 3 months ago that Hansel isn't actually their kid. Some lawyer contacted Dad about it. I think there's some legal thing involved, and they've been planning this reveal ever since. Chloe! Linda's voice cracked through the room. Turn that off! But it was too late. I turned slowly toward my sister. 3 months ago, I repeated. Someone contacted Dad? Her eyes widened. I wasn't supposed to say that. Who contacted him? I asked, stepping closer. If my biological parents are dead, who reached out 3 months ago? She backed up, phone still recording. I don't know. I just saw an email on Dad's computer. Some law firm. Something about end of agreement, mandatory disclosure. Edward lunged toward her phone. Chloe, I swear. But I stepped in front of him. End of agreement? I repeated. What agreement? The ballroom was completely silent now. Thousands watching, thousands witnessing. There is no agreement, Linda snapped, but her voice no longer carried authority. It carried fear. She's lying, Linda shrieked. Chloe, tell them you're lying. But Chloe's face gave her away. She wasn't lying. Someone had contacted my parents 3 months ago. Someone with attorneys. Someone who had forced them to reveal something they had buried for 30 years. Slowly I turned back toward the man in the gray suit. He had stepped closer now, maybe 10 feet away. His eyes were wet, and when I really looked at him, really looked, I saw it. My eyes. He had my eyes. You're not dead, I whispered. He shook his head gently, tears slipping down his face. No, sweetheart, he said softly. I'm not. Before I continue, if you've already figured out who that man is, Drop your guess, and if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, tell me how you survived it. I read every single comment. Now back to that night. The man stepped forward, and the crowd instinctively parted. "Allow me to introduce myself," he said. His voice was calm, measured, carrying a quiet authority my father had spent his life trying to imitate. "Security!" Edward barked, his voice cracking. "Call security! He's trespassing." No one moved. "My name is Daniel Whitmore," the man said, stopping just a few feet from me. "And I am Hansel Parker's biological father." The ballroom exploded. Gasps, shouts, phones rising into the air. I couldn't breathe. "You?" My voice trembled. "You're supposed to be dead." His jaw tightened slightly. "Is that what they told you?" I nodded. "I have never been dead," Daniel said gently. "I've been waiting 30 years for this day." "He's lying!" Linda screamed, her composure finally unraveling. "He's a con artist! Edward, tell them!" But Edward stood frozen, his face drained of all color. "Edward," Daniel said, turning toward him, a steel edge entered his tone. "Would you like to tell her the truth, or shall I?" Silence. Daniel gave a small nod. "That's what I thought." Then he looked back at me, and his expression softened. "Your mother's name was Elena Morales," he said quietly. "We loved each other very much. When she became pregnant with you, her family disapproved." He paused, steadying himself. "They forced her to give you up." My head was spinning. "Then how—" "Edward and Linda Parker agreed to adopt you," Daniel continued, his eyes flicking briefly toward them. "Under specific conditions." The air in the room tightened. Conditions they were very well compensated for. The floor felt unsteady beneath me. "What conditions?" I asked. Daniel reached into his jacket and withdrew a photograph, slightly faded, edges worn from years of handling. A young woman stared back at me. My face, my eyes, my smile. "This was your mother," he said softly, "and she loved you more than anything in this world." The woman in the pencil skirt, his assistant, stepped forward and handed him a thick manila folder. "Edward," Daniel said evenly, "you just demanded that Hansel repay $600,000 for the cost of raising her." "That's right," my father shot back weakly. "Every cent we spent." "Interesting." Daniel opened the folder. "Because according to my records, you've already been paid." He lifted a stack of documents high enough for the room to see. Bank statements, wire confirmations, dozens of them. $1,750, he said clearly, every single month for 28 years. The room went silent again. Beginning in 1996, ending last year, that totals $588,000. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. "What is that?" Uncle Thomas demanded. "These," Daniel replied, handing copies to the nearest table, "are wire transfer records. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers. Each one documented." He paused deliberately. "And signed by Linda Parker, confirming receipt." Linda made a strangled sound. I turned to her slowly. "You received money," I said. "For 28 years?" She refused to meet my eyes. "Answer me." "It was compensation," she screamed, "for taking you in. For raising someone else's—" "Unwanted?" Daniel's voice cut through hers like glass. "I begged to keep her," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "I begged to raise my daughter myself, but your family demanded I stay away until she turned 30. They demanded I not interfere." His throat tightened. "And I agreed, because I believed you would love her. I believed you would give her a good life." He looked at me then, tears openly falling. "I am so sorry, Hansel. I am so sorry I wasn't there." He reached into his jacket once more. This time he pulled out an envelope. Old, yellowed, the edges softened from years of being handled. "Your mother, Elena," he said quietly, "passed away when you were 5. My breath caught. Cancer. She fought it for 2 years. But in the end, he couldn't finish. I felt tears sliding down my own face as he extended the envelope toward me. Before she passed, Daniel said softly, she wrote you a letter. She asked me to keep it safe until you were old enough to understand. He held the envelope out with both hands like something sacred. I took it. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely tear it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in elegant handwriting that felt strangely familiar, like a melody I'd heard once and never forgotten. My dearest Hansel, if you're reading this, I'm no longer there to hold you. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm sorry I couldn't stay. Tears blurred the ink. You were never unwanted. You were never a mistake. From the moment I knew you existed, you were the greatest gift of my life. Your father, Daniel, is a good man. The best man I've ever known. I was young, I was scared. I didn't fight hard enough for us, and that will always be my greatest regret. Please don't blame him for being absent. He wanted you. He has always wanted you. Live with courage, be kind, be strong, and wherever I am, know that I am watching over you. I love you. I will always love you. Mom. I pressed the letter against my chest. 75 people stood in absolute silence, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. I felt found. I need to say something. Margaret's voice cut through the stillness. She stood up slowly, clutching her purse like armor. Margaret, sit down, Linda hissed. No, she said, shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. I've kept your secrets for 30 years, Linda. I can't do it anymore. She reached into her purse and pulled out a bundle of old, wrinkled papers. Faded, creased, some stained with age. These are bank receipts, she said, her hands trembling. Every month, Linda asked me to withdraw the wire transfers in cash. She told me it was from a life insurance payout. She let out a bitter laugh. I believed her. For years, I believed her. Margaret, Linda began. I found out the truth 5 years ago, Margaret continued, her voice growing steadier. I saw Daniel Whitmore's name on one of the transfers. I confronted Linda. She swallowed hard. She told me if I ever said anything, she'd expose my mistakes. She blackmailed me into silence. I turned slowly toward the woman I had called Mom, and for the first time in my life, I truly saw her. You knew, I said quietly. All this time, you knew I had a father who wanted me. A father who was paying to make sure I was taken care of, and you let me grow up believing I was unwanted. Linda's face twisted. We raised you, she snapped. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. With his money, I replied, gesturing toward Daniel. You raised me with his money. My voice no longer trembled. And you still treated me like I was a burden. I stood fully upright. You didn't want $600,000 from me tonight. The room was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. You wanted to get rid of me before he could tell me the truth. Before I could find out who you really are. Linda had no answer, because there wasn't one. Edward made one final attempt. Hansel, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. We're still your family. We raised you. We love you. This has all just been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I almost laughed. You staged a public humiliation, I said calmly. You demanded $600,000. You threatened my career. You let Chloe live-stream my destruction to thousands of people. I shook my head. That's not a misunderstanding. That's betrayal. But we're still your parents, Edward insisted weakly. No. The word came out steady, final. You're not. You're the people who accepted money to raise me and still treated me like I was disposable. You're the people who lied to me for 30 years. You're the people who weaponized my own birthday against me. I turned slowly toward the crowd, all 75 of them. I'm not asking any of you to choose sides, I said. This is my family's mess, not yours. I paused. But not one of you stood up for me tonight. Not when I was called a fraud. Not when my keys were taken. Not when my sister shoved a camera in my face. 75 people. And not one voice in my defense. Eyes dropped to the floor. I won't forget that, I said quietly. Finally, I turned back to Daniel. Mr. Whitmore, I swallowed. Daniel, I need time. I can't just call you Dad. Not yet. His eyes were still wet, but he nodded. I've waited 30 years, he said gently. I can wait a little longer. I walked toward the ballroom doors. Linda tried to step in front of me. You can't just leave. We're not finished. I looked her straight in the eye. Yes, we are. And I walked out of the Four Seasons Hotel without looking back. I didn't stay to see what happened next, but Margaret told me later. And Chloe's live stream, because she forgot to turn it off, captured every second. The moment the doors closed behind me, the room erupted. Edward turned on Linda. You knew? He shouted. You knew about the money and never told me? I was protecting us, she screamed back. Protecting this family by lying for 28 years? You never asked questions, she shot back. You just spent what I gave you. Relatives scattered like startled birds. Uncle Thomas tried to intervene and got shoved aside. Margaret quietly gathered her purse and slipped out through a side exit. And Chloe. Chloe stood frozen, staring at her phone as her follower count began dropping in real time. Within 24 hours, the live stream had been clipped and shared millions of times. But not in the way she imagined. Toxic parents exposed on live stream. Worst birthday ever. Influencer films her own family's downfall. They looked very different under a spotlight. As for Daniel, he left quietly. No yelling, no confrontation. He hadn't come for revenge. He came with the truth. And the truth had done more damage than any attack ever could. That night, I sat alone in my apartment in Canton and read Elena's letter over and over again. 17 times. I traced her handwriting with my fingertips, as if somehow I could feel her through the ink. I studied the photograph Daniel had given me, my mother at 22, laughing at something just outside the frame. Her eyes were exactly like mine. I cried until my chest ached and my breathing turned uneven. But underneath the grief, beneath the shock, the betrayal, the collapse of everything I thought I knew, there was something else. Hope. The quiet, steady kind that comes when you finally understand who you are. 3 days later, I was called into the director of nursing's office at Johns Hopkins. I walked in expecting the worst. Edward had promised to ruin me. He had connections, influence, 15 years on the hospital board. Dr. Allison Grant sat behind her desk, her expression unreadable. Please sit down, Hansel. I sat and waited. I'm going to be direct, she said, folding her hands neatly on the desk. I received an email from your father, Edward Parker. He demanded that we terminate your employment. My stomach dropped. He claims you're unfit for the charge nurse position, that you have serious character concerns. She paused. He also attached a video. The live stream, of course. Dr. Grant, I can explain. Hansel, she interrupted gently. I watched the video. I closed my eyes. I watched you stand in front of 75 people who were actively trying to dismantle you, she continued. I watched you remain composed. I watched you ask intelligent, logical questions, and I watched you walk out with your dignity intact. I slowly opened my eyes. There's more, she said, leaning back slightly. I also received a phone call. My pulse quickened. From Daniel Whitmore. I swallowed. My biological father, I said quietly. She gave a small nod. He called to make one thing very clear, that he would not interfere in any employment decisions regarding you. She allowed that to settle. He said, and I quote, Hansel deserves to succeed on her own merit, not because of who her father is. I couldn't speak. The charge nurse position is yours, Dr. Grant said firmly. You earned it. She stood and extended her hand. Congratulations! I shook it, barely able to process what was happening. One more thing, she added with a faint smile. Edward Parker's email didn't damage your reputation, but it certainly damaged his. She slid a document across her desk. The board has formally removed his name from our benefactor wall. It was a small victory, but it felt good. 2 weeks after the party, Margaret called with updates. Edward and Linda had filed for divorce. Not entirely because of me, but not entirely separate either. The night of the confrontation, Edward had gone through Linda's private financial records. He found more than just Daniel's wire transfers. There were hidden accounts, undisclosed purchases, a secret credit card carrying a $40,000 balance. Apparently, Linda had been quietly planning her exit for years. Margaret told me Edward had simply given her the excuse she needed. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had staged a public trial to expose my betrayal. Instead, they exposed their own. Chloe lost over 20,000 followers in the first week alone. Aren't you the girl who live-streamed your sister's trauma? Imagine exploiting your own family for views. Couldn't pay me to follow someone like this. Brand partnerships dissolved overnight. She deleted her account and reappeared weeks later under a new name, posting mindfulness content. The irony wrote itself. Edward emailed me once, a long message that managed to sound apologetic while still blaming everyone but himself. "I'm sorry things escalated," he wrote, "but you have to understand the pressure I was under." I deleted it. Linda called 12 times. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages shifted over time. Anger, then pleading, then tears. I didn't respond, not because I hated them, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something it had taken me 30 years to learn. Some relationships cannot be repaired. They can only be survived. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something. Do you think Hansel should forgive her adoptive parents? Comment 1 if you think yes. What happened in the months that followed changed everything. Let me finish the story. 1 month after the night that changed everything, I met Daniel for the second time. Not at his office in Washington, D.C. Not in some polished restaurant with white tablecloths and valet parking. We met at Pitango Bakery plus Cafe in Fells Point, a small place with uneven wooden tables, chipped paint near the windows, and espresso that was fine at best. "This is where Elena and I used to come," he said, as he lowered himself into a worn armchair near the back corner. "Before everything fell apart, we'd sit right here and talk about the future." I glanced around at the peeling wallpaper and crooked picture frames. "It's not what I expected," I admitted. "What did you expect?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I said. "Something bigger." He smiled, a quiet, almost sad smile that somehow made him look younger. "Money doesn't fix everything, Hansel," he said. "I learned that the hard way." He stirred his coffee slowly. "I could have fought harder for you. I could have hired better attorneys, pressured Elena's family, used every resource I had to force the issue." I looked at him. "Why didn't you?" "Because Elena asked me not to." There it was, 30 years of regret sitting behind his eyes. "She was dying," he continued softly, "and she was terrified. Terrified that if I pushed too hard, her family would take you somewhere I'd never find you." His voice tightened. "She made me promise to wait, to trust that the Parkers would do right by you." "They didn't," I said quietly. "No," he replied, his voice breaking. "They didn't, and I will always regret not seeing that sooner." We sat there in silence for a while, the hum of the espresso machine filling the space between us. "I don't know how to do this," I finally said. "I don't know how to have a father." He reached across the table and gently took my hand. "Neither do I," he admitted with a small, vulnerable smile. "But I'd like to try, if you'll let me." I didn't pull away. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's try." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't instant closeness. But it was a beginning. 3 months later, I signed the lease on my own condo in Canton waterfront. It wasn't luxurious. A modest 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an older building. The kitchen barely fit 2 people, and the windows stuck when it rained. But it was mine. Every dollar came from my savings, my paychecks, my overtime shifts, my sacrifices. Daniel offered to help with the down payment. I need to do this myself, I told him over coffee, our now weekly ritual at Pitango, always in that same corner. He nodded without hesitation. I understand. And he truly did. That was the difference. He understood that helping didn't mean rescuing, that being a father didn't mean taking control. On moving day, he showed up anyway, not with money or hired movers, but with a toolbox. We spent 6 hours assembling IKEA furniture. The bookshelf ended up slightly crooked. It was perfect. On my new desk, I placed Elena's photograph in a simple wooden frame. Every morning, I look at her face, and I see myself. I don't speak to Edward anymore, or Linda, or Chloe. Margaret calls occasionally. She's the only Parker I still answer. She sends recipes, asks about work, never mentions the ballroom. I think she carries guilt. I think she's trying in her own quiet way to make amends. I let her. Daniel and I meet every Sunday now. Sometimes we talk for hours. Sometimes we sit in comfortable silence. I'm learning who he is, his dry humor, his regrets, his quiet steadiness. I'm not ready to call him Dad, but I'm closer than I was. Last week he told me, I don't need a title, Hansol. I just need you in my life. For now, that's enough, more than enough. Looking back, I've spent a lot of time asking myself why. Why did Edward and Linda do what they did? A therapist friend explained it to me like this. Edward wasn't a monster. He was terrified. His entire identity was built on control. Control of money, control of image, control of the story. When Daniel resurfaced, that control cracked. And when people like Edward feel exposed, they don't retreat, they attack. He didn't try to destroy me because he hated me. He tried to destroy me because he was afraid of losing power. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains it. Linda was different, more complicated. She carried jealousy like it was stitched into her skin. Jealousy of Elena, the woman Daniel truly loved. Jealousy of me, the living reminder of that love. Every time she looked at my face, she saw someone else's story. She never bonded with me because she never allowed herself to. And when the chance came to push me out while still appearing righteous, she took it. Again, not an excuse, an explanation. And then there's me. Here's the hard truth. I made it easy. 30 years of people-pleasing. 30 years of minimizing my needs to keep the peace. 30 years of believing that if I just tried harder, loved harder, gave more, they would finally see my worth. They never did. Because people who benefit from your self-doubt don't want you to discover your value. Your insecurity is their leverage. I was so busy trying to earn their love that I never stopped to ask whether they were capable of giving it. If there's one thing I want you to carry with you after hearing my story, it's this. Love should never feel like a debt. For 30 years, I believed that if I worked harder, gave more, stayed quieter, and proved myself enough times, I would finally earn the love I was chasing. But real love isn't something you earn through exhaustion. It isn't a transaction. It doesn't come with invoices, conditions, or public humiliation. What happened to me wasn't just about betrayal. It was about identity. About discovering that the people who raised you don't always define you. And sometimes the truth that breaks your heart is the same truth that sets you free. If someone in your life constantly makes you feel small, unworthy, or not enough, listen to that feeling. It's not weakness. It's clarity. Boundaries are not cruelty. Walking away is not failure. Protecting your peace is not selfish. I lost a version of my family that night, but I found myself, and that changed everything. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need the reminder that they are not defined by how they were treated. Comment below and tell me what boundary changed your life.